300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. Have to ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game. I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. So we have a great show for you today, but we do have to start with something very sad that unfortunately happened. Some news broke yesterday that the Hall of Fame NFL coach and the legendary broadcaster John Madden passed away yesterday at the age of 85. And of course, this comes just a couple days after an incredible documentary about his life was released on Christmas by Fox a couple days ago. And I just wanted to talk about John Madden a little bit. Obviously, I wasn't born right when John Madden was at the peak of his broadcasting, but I did watch him for years. And this is a guy who obviously was a star high school football player, actually earned a scholarship to the University of Oregon, and was childhood friends with the legendary USC coach, John Robinson, for a long time. Ended up transferring to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo after that brief stint. And 1958, made the Eagles practice squad for 1 season. Ended up getting injured that derailed his professional playing career. But this is a guy who has really had to just undergo so much. His journey is quite amazing for someone who had to start at the junior college level at Allen Hancock, which is actually in California, part of the kind of Western State Conference at the junior college level. And from there, he was a defensive coordinator at San Diego State for 2 years. And that's what kind of allowed him to shine a little bit. And he landed his job with the Oakland Raiders as a linebackers coach before being most famously known as the head coach of the Oakland Raiders for 10 years. Great 10-year stint. In fact, he was kind of the perfect guy to coach this renegade Raiders team. He was burly, he was unpretentious. He dressed a little disheveled on the sideline because that's who he is. He was very modest, very humble individual. And the fact that he was coaching a bunch of castaways and misfits at that time, it was perfect for him to be the voice on the sideline, how animated and how passionate he was about the game of football and about his coaching. He was obviously, after that, a legendary broadcaster for 3 decades, about 1979 to 2008, was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2006. And the interesting thing about him is he was obviously a part of so many tremendous games. I mean, as a coach, again, he reached 7 AFC title games, part of the 78 kind of holy roller game, was part of the Immaculate Reception game in 1972 between the Steelers and the Raiders. That was that incredible, just out of this world 4th down completion, Terry Bradshaw with the Steelers, and it hits 2 defenders on a 4th and 10. It ricochets off the back of 2 Raiders defenders into the hands of Franco Harris, and he runs it for a touchdown. They win 13-7. But then he ultimately prevailed and won a Super Bowl in 1977 over the Minnesota Vikings. And again, this was during a time in which Fred Biletnikoff was the Super Bowl MVP. Ken Stabler was the quarterback, and he had to go through the steel curtain at that time. There were a lot of elite teams when he was coaching, and yet during that time, his record was 103-32-7, 76% winning percentage, which is the highest among NFL coaches who have coached over 100 games. But the thing about John Madden is obviously people now that grow up recognize him because of the name, because of the Madden football game. And obviously he endorsed that product. But at his heart, John Madden was a teacher. He was a communicator. He had a deep passion and affinity for the game of football, for the sport of football. And more importantly, in conveying that passion to others. His ability to process complex plays on a football field and present it in a way that was both informing, yet captivating and entertaining, and digestible in an easily digestible manner, rather, to process it in an easily digestible manner is one of the things that made him so unique about his position, about his job. Because that's the job of a broadcaster, is to be able to relay information in a succinct manner that's easily comprehensible. And yet John Madden had a way about doing it that was so special. And again, it was so informative, but it was also so entertaining because people tuned in to football games to listen to John Madden, to listen to what he had to say. Whether it was a blowout, you would stay in till the end. You would stay tuned in to hear what type of remark or interjection he was going to make. He was famous for just saying boom and doink and saying a bunch of terms, really just relaying the emotions that he was feeling in the moment. Whatever he was feeling in the moment on the booth, watching the football game, that's what you got. You kind of felt like you were within close proximity to him. And obviously one of my favorite moments with John Madden has to do with the turducken. He kind of made that a tradition on Thanksgiving, serving a turducken, which is a deconstructed chicken stuffed inside a deconstructed duck, stuffed inside a deconstructed turkey. And that's what he would serve. Famously did that. And there were times when he was commenting, whenever there's any kind of ancillary stuff going on in a football game, maybe there's a pigeon out on the field, he would be making some quick kind of witty remarks about it. I remember he commented on Troy Aikman's lack of a beard once as well. And again, what he wanted to do the most, more than anything, was teach the game of football to others, to be able to hopefully convey the same passion to those that didn't quite get the experiences that he got, to be on the field, to be coaching these players, to be in the booth, to watch the games being played. He wanted to convey that same joy and to share that same love and affinity for the sport. And I remember reading about how he recalled one time right after he got injured. Again, this was in 1958 when he was on the Philadelphia Eagles training summer team, the practice squad, rather, summer practice squad. And again, he injured his knee, and he ended up kind of, because of an assistant coach, gravitating towards watching film, watching game tape. And that's what encouraged him to earn a degree in teaching. And this was a guy who was extremely precocious, extremely knowledgeable. He was a brilliant football mind. He became the youngest head football coach at the time. He was 32 when he got the Raiders gig. Again, we think about guys like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan and Matt LaFleur and Sean McDermott and Brandon Staley and Nick Sirianni, all these guys who are young and they're getting chances to be the head coach of football teams. John Madden kind of paved the way for that. John Madden popularized the sport of football. He really, really helped grow its popularity, not only through the game, Madden, but first and foremost because of the educational value that he brought to the broadcast. I mean, again, his greatest skill set was in teaching and communicating. And as a legendary broadcaster, he really changed the way that we viewed football games. We viewed NFL games. And he was just universally beloved, whether it was by players, by coaches, by fans, by media. Everyone loved John Madden. In fact, when the documentary came out about him, everyone was willing to speak up about him. Every time the film crews approached people to talk about John Madden, no one shied away, even people that had kind of remained a little bit more recluse throughout the majority of their careers. They just decided, hey, for this guy, I want to talk. And again, he was a star broadcaster. He was the first broadcaster to broadcast across 4 major NFL networks, both Fox, both CBS, Fox, ABC, and NBC. And whether he was paired with Pat Summerall or Al Michaels, it was a joy and a thrill to listen to him and to hear him broadcast. And I remember there's apparently, he kind of made broadcasting a cool thing. He was a star broadcaster, which is part of the reason why I have so much affinity for him. When he joined Fox, when the Murdoch's family, Rupert Murdoch, the owner, when he signed John Madden, because he was a star, all the networks wanted him, he paid John Madden more money than any active NFL player was making in the league at the time. That's how big time John Madden was, a 16-time Emmy winner. And again, obviously famously known for taking his buses everywhere because he had a aerophobia, fear of flying, or an aviophobia. I'm not really sure which one it is. And he was claustrophobic as well. So those 2 things kind of contributed to him just taking a bus all the way around. But I know for me, again, the passion for him came for teaching. He wanted to teach at the heart. And for me, getting a chance to watch him, to listen to him was a true privilege. And he's an iconic figure. And he's someone that the NFL game, that the game of football will dearly miss. And it was just a privilege to get a chance to watch him. But he will be dearly missed, John Madden. Okay, so want to transition to quickly a couple topics in the NBA. So this story was interesting to me. There's been some gaining momentum in the NBA about a midseason tournament. Now, obviously, we've heard rumblings about this for the past several years, but apparently over the last couple weeks, it's really starting to gain some traction and get some serious backing. Now, the financial incentive, the players on the winning teams would each receive a $1 million purse in every individual player. And there's the opportunity for greater financial and competitive incentives as well. But that's the most basic foundation. So the NBA and the NBPA are kind of working out the elements right now to enact this and implement this in potentially next year, potentially 1 to 2 years. So it's very soon. It's very soon. And there'd be a pool play as part of the regular season. And those games would kind of factor into the totality of the standings. It wouldn't just be based off the 8 teams with the best record from both conferences. It would kind of be sporadic games that are selected for pool play. And it would culminate prior to Christmas, and it would reduce the total number of NBA games from 82 to 78 at the end of the day. So the proposal would shorten the NBA season. So let me first say that I actually think that this would be a great addition for the NBA. I really do, because I don't think that the format would dilute the structure of the NBA, and I don't think that while the fabric of the NBA would change slightly, I don't think that the essence of the league is going to change. which I think are two really important things, because we as fans don't want the natural fabric of the game that we love to be forever altered. And I don't think that this format, the way that it's formatted, the way that it's spread out across kind of pool play, would do that. And there are a lot of things to think about. And first are the positives. So let's be honest about something. The job of a huge corporation like the NBA is to increase revenue. That's their number one goal, is to increase revenue. That's the job of the NBA. Whether we like it or not, that is their number one goal. That's what their number one priority is. So in the process of that, the NBA has to be a little bit self-serving, but it's also needing to satisfy the needs of many others. So it has to satisfy the needs of the NBA. It's got to satisfy the needs of the NBA owners. It's got to satisfy the needs of fans. And most importantly, it has to satisfy the need of NBA players. So let's start with the NBA itself. Well, this would be a huge benefit for the NBA because it would add a lot of TV revenue, especially with new contract negotiations coming up. This would add more nationally televised games, which means more revenue for the league. Subsequently, more revenue for the league and on these TV revenue deals means more revenue for every individual team. So every owner or governing body gets more money for their respective team. So we've satisfied the league. We've satisfied the NBA owners. For the fans, it adds so much more entertainment value because it enhances, again, the number of eyeballs that are going to be on these games. And the NBA is a product development company. At the end of the day, at its core, they're selling a product. And we as the consumers of basketball are the customers. And if that's a way to generate more eyeballs and to sell and promote its sport even more, then that's what they're going to do. We've seen how successful the play-in tournament is at the end of the year. And this is going to have the same kind of effect, I think, that fans are going to gravitate more to television sets. They're going to be more eager to tune in on a regular October, November, December game if they know, oh, this is part of the pool play. So I think there is an enhanced value for fans from an entertainment aspect. So we've satisfied the NBA, we've satisfied the owners, and we've satisfied the NBA fans. Now the players. So this is the interesting perspective. So I will say this, because obviously from an NBA's perspective, what it also does is it enhances the significance and the value of the regular season, because it augments the number of meaningful games that are being played by all these teams, by all these players. They can't just kind of sleepwalk through the regular season. There are some serious incentives here. Now, again, for the players, I will concede this. For about the top 1%, maybe top 5% at best, if I'm really thinking in a utopian perspective, well, maybe the financial incentive, because these guys make such exorbitant amounts of money, maybe this financial incentive of a $1 million purse isn't really going to move the needle much for them. So I will concede for the top 1, maybe 5% at best, for that select cohort of NBA players, okay, maybe the financial incentive isn't strong enough. But for the vast majority of NBA players, for about 95, if not 99% of NBA players, this is an enormous financial incentive. This is a huge bonus, even for NBA players who are making $5 to $7 million a year, which, mind you, is probably in the top 90% of the league. There are about 500 players in the NBA. I guarantee you most of them aren't making above $5 to $7 million a year. Even for those players, $1 million purse is about a 20% increase in a bonus. 25% if it's $7 million. If you're a league veteran and you're receiving a veteran's minimum of $2 to $3 million, that's a huge incentive for you. That's maybe 50% bonus for just trying a little bit harder in the regular season. So the other thing that it does is it adds some relevance for the bottom feeders in the NBA, because again, you're talking about the majority of the league that isn't making that kind of money. So for them, it could be life-changing or, decade-changing type of money for some of these people. And again, for the bottom feeders in the league who don't get the opportunity to consistently reach the playoffs and to play on the bigger stage. This is an opportunity for them to kind of play in the bright lights a little bit, to get a chance to showcase their skill sets on a slightly bigger stage that they otherwise wouldn't have been provided if there wasn't this tournament. And that's the reality, because the NBA has been seeing a load managing problem. I mean, this has been a legitimate excuse for players to circumvent the system. It's a way to conserve their body and preserve themselves a little bit longer, which is smart, which is the pragmatic thing to do. The NBA recognizes this, sees this as a problem, and they're attempting to address it. Because now you throw in financial, and again, they haven't disclosed all the financial or all the competitive incentives. There could be others that come along the pipeline, but that's the reality, is they're trying to address it. And again, there's going to be a select number of NBA players like the LeBrons, the KDs, the Giannis's, the Stephs, the guys that are making 200, the Dames, Westbrooks, the guys that are making $200+ million who are going to be against this addition. But for the vast majority of NBA players, I think that this could be a really beneficial thing. And for better or for worse, you have to give the NBA credit on this front. They have shown just a propensity to be extremely innovative and to be extremely progressive. And they're such an elastic organization. They're very flexible. They're always trying to do new things to improve the game. For better or for worse, they're always willing to adapt and develop and evolve. And I think that this would actually be a really beneficial thing. I really do. I think this would be a beneficial thing. Okay. I was going to touch on Westbrook in a moment, but I'll put that to the back burner, because I'm going to bring on my next guest, which I haven't had him on for a little bit. I know that people were missing him a little bit. It's my pleasure to bring on to the show NBC Sports sports curator, content curator and distributor for Peacock, the platform, my friend Ben Cross, joining me. And Ben, as I bring you on, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Jonah. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
It's been a little bit. It's been a little bit. I know there hasn't been so much to cheer about on our personal schools fronts. So that's part of the reason why I haven't had you on in a little bit. But no, I appreciate you taking some time.
Jonah, are you forgetting the volleyball championship that the
Wisconsin
women won a few weeks ago? That was significant. We don't win many championships, as you know.
That's true. You know what? I did talk about it. I did talk about it on the show. I did. But we haven't really talked about it between you and I very much. But that was very cool. That was very cool. And actually, when you and I went to Wisconsin, that's kind of when they first started to become really relevant, starting to crack into the top 25. They weren't making that kind of national noise just yet, but they were starting to be put on the map a little bit more. So that was cool.
That was very cool.
Okay, so I want to talk with you, Ben. The college football playoff, the national semifinals are coming up this Friday. It's kind of crazy that it's already hit this Friday. I feel like we kind of forgot about it the last couple weeks because it's kind of hasn't been at the forefront of our minds. But I want to start with Alabama and Cincinnati because I think that this is an interesting matchup. Listen, here's the interesting thing to me, and I want to hear what you have to say. But for me, Alabama's offense, okay, it's been prolific all year. They haven't necessarily been known for their defense, though they're actually a top 5 rushing team. And we saw against Georgia that they're more than capable of clamping down defensively when you've got a bazillion 5-star athletes. For Cincinnati, what's interesting to me, Ben, is obviously Desmond Ridder. What I like about him is he doesn't turn the ball over that much. He takes care of the football. He's got like 30 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, but he can move. And normally kind of dual threat quarterbacks pose some problems for Nick Saban. But to me, it's not even about that. It's about the Bearcats' defense, because their defense and their secondary in particular is excellent. The problem is, that the kid's name is Kobe Bryant, actually, the cornerback, but it's spelled with a C as opposed to a K, which is pretty crazy. But the thing to me, Ben, is I view this matchup kind of like an NFL team playing the Kansas City Chiefs at their peak, which is it's not that I'm concerned about Cincinnati's defense being able to slow down Alabama, just like it is facing the Chiefs. What I'm concerned about is whether or not Cincinnati's offense can match the firepower of Alabama's offense. That's how I see it. How do you see this matchup?
Well, I think you're 100% spot on. I do think Cincinnati absolutely has the talent and the experience to keep up with Bama. I think what's interesting about this matchup is you said Bama is like the Chiefs. What's interesting with Bama is they showed up against Georgia and they absolutely spread out that incredible defense and dominated them. But if you look back just a week prior, they really struggled on offense against an Auburn team that had a backup quarterback, a quarterback that hasn't played all that well in Finley. And they also struggled against A&M. They put up points in that game, but they lost that one. They struggled against Florida, LSU. This is not an unbeatable Alabama team. You look at some of the champions of the last few years, Alabama last year, LSU the year prior. Those were unstoppable teams. They blew out everyone they played. That isn't this Alabama team, and a Cincinnati team that can do what Georgia didn't do, which is keep drives alive. Desmond Ritter's a phenomenal quarterback. I think he can keep the drives going and stay ahead of the sticks on first and second down, but also convert tricky third and longs, third and manageables. And if they can do that, control the clock a little bit, I think they prevent Bama from stretching the field. Their secondary can drop back and limit some of those incredible Alabama wide receivers like Williams and Mechie. And I think potentially keep this closer than a lot of people might think. So I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. I definitely am not saying Cincinnati should be favored to win, but I absolutely think that they can hang with them, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if it was a close game, say, going into the fourth quarter. Cincinnati, as we talked about, they have experience across the board. They have some standout players. People forget Desmond Ridder was in the conversation for the Heisman until later in the year when Cincinnati sputtered a little bit. But Bama is not unbeatable, and I absolutely think Cincinnati, if they, as you mentioned, Ridder can't make mistakes. He has to be reasonable in the pocket, convert third downs, keep drives alive. If they can do that, I think they absolutely can keep up with them, and not just keep up with them in an absolute shootout, but actually control the time possession and the speed of the game a little bit and make it a more manageable score that they'd have to catch up to.
I mean, it would certainly be a tremendous storyline if Cincinnati was able to win. I mean, talk about a referendum on the committee for years if they were able to win that. But it's also funny to me how Alabama, we kind of just forgot the fact that they won the championship last year, and then they're back this year again after beating Georgia. So it's funny what can happen in a couple months. Okay, let's now transition to the second semifinal matchup, Georgia and Michigan. I had a hard time picking between these two teams, Ben. I'll say I have, at this moment, again, my emotions may change, depending on the day that I wake up. I am giving a narrow edge to Michigan for a couple reasons. I think that there's no question Georgia's defense is elite. There's no question about that, and they've given teams problems all season. The thing, though, about Michigan that impresses me is their ability to run the football. I mean, Hassan Haskins, what they did to Ohio State, even though they still, C.J. Stroud still threw for like 500 yards, but the bottom line is they controlled the line of scrimmage. They were really physical up front. And I do think that Michigan, even though they're not known for their defense or their offense, they're kind of just known as being a tough physical run team. And that's been a recipe that's worked for them really well. They're like a top 10 team in the red zone on offense. Georgia can't finish in the red zone. Now they have the best red zone defense. But what I think that this game's going to come down to is Haskins and McNamara making a couple more plays than Georgia. I think because of field position, it's going to be a big field position type of game. And I'm just not sure if Stetson Bennett can produce enough offensively to weather whatever this Michigan kind of attack is. They're on this special season. Again, I'm not heavily leaning towards Michigan, just slightly edging in their favor at this moment. Where do you lean on this matchup?
I'll actually go a different direction. I'm heavily leaning toward Georgia on this one. I know both of these teams pretty well, and if you look at them throughout the year, as you mentioned, Georgia has that phenomenal defense. It's mostly centered on the run. The reason Georgia got exposed on defense in the SEC championship was because Bama stretched them out. They didn't have a big run game. they ultimately just tried to work it to their athletes on the perimeter, and they pushed it downfield and didn't have any problems with that. If Georgia has any weakness in their defense, it's in their secondary. And Michigan doesn't really have the firepower to keep up with that. I know they have good athletes, but their receivers are not what makes that offense great. As you mentioned, Hassan Haskins was one of the reasons that they were able to beat Michigan. Georgia will be able to stack the box and key in on that. And I don't think Michigan's going to score that many points. I just don't think McNamara is all that explosive. He's efficient on third downs, and he's a solid quarterback. He doesn't make a ton of mistakes. But Ohio State does not have a great defense. They don't have a great secondary. And Michigan was able to come out with a balanced attack and not make any mistakes and beat an Ohio State team. But they didn't necessarily blow them out. And I think Georgia might absolutely shut down this Michigan offense. And if you look on the other side of the ball, Georgia's offense isn't necessarily going to blow the top off. Michigan has a phenomenal defense, but I just think Georgia's not going to make any mistakes. I think they're going to do what they need to do. They have a great run offense and a balanced passing attack. Stetson has a better arm than people realize, and I think ultimately Georgia's just going to come out a couple weeks of rest after they got embarrassed. I think Michigan's coming in a little too confident, maybe. We certainly know Michigan fans, and we know that fan base and that team. I think they don't really know the kind of talent level outside of Ohio State that they're going up against. And I think Georgia is ultimately going to really control time possession. And I think they're really not going to be able to score all that much. And that's really going to frustrate Michigan. And we'll see what happens. I mean, if you look at the Michigan-Wisconsin game, for instance, Michigan was losing at half 10-7. And that was a great.
I don't want to think about
that's fair. I'll just bring up the point that Wisconsin has a phenomenal defense, and they held Michigan to 7 points in that first half. And if Graham Mertz was playing in that second half, there's a good chance Michigan wouldn't have scored nearly as much as they would have, and Michigan would have sputtered most of the game. And I think Georgia's going to do the exact same thing, but they won't have Graham Mertz at quarterback, and that is a big step up for them. So I actually think Georgia has a good chance to dominate this game.
And I personally would love to see that. I wouldn't be upset about that at all if that were to happen.
You and me both.
Okay, I want to transition to the NFL really quickly. I know you are a huge Dallas Cowboys fan, but for the first time in a long time this year, it actually is. It makes sense to talk about them for positive things. So they
one of the few.
So listen, I didn't put too much stock into their blowout win over the Washington football team, even though I think their defense has proven time and time again they're elite. My attention shifted to their offense because Dak bounced back against the Washington football team, but I'm not necessarily sure if they've come all the way back to where they were at the start of the year, if they're going up against teams with the firepower like the Packers and the Rams and the Bucs. Where is your confidence level as it relates to the Cowboys offense after that impressive performance on Sunday?
Well, I think that's a good point. I think that's where you kind of have to focus on if you're looking for what changed for the Cowboys. Their defense has played phenomenally in the last few weeks. In fact, it's been some of the only reasons that they've won games. But if you look at the offense, yes, they improved, but a lot of the points that they were able to put up against Washington came from great defensive plays, the defense pinning them, a pick six. It wasn't necessarily all offense. If you look at the second half, I believe Washington was tied with Dallas at the end of the fourth quarter at 7-7 in that specific quarter, and the offense didn't necessarily do a ton in the third quarter either. So I think if you're looking at that offense, they still need to improve. They need to be more balanced. Zeke and Pollard have been a little damaged and struggling with COVID. If those two running backs can come back and their offensive line can be healthy approaching the playoffs, then I think they can have a much more balanced attack, ease up for Dak. I think Dak had to force a lot more in the passing game in previous weeks. And while he's an accurate quarterback, I think he's still struggling with some certain lingering issues injury-wise, and he hasn't necessarily been as accurate as he'd like to be. If he can continue to get more space and time because the run game is helping them on first and second down, then I think they can be as explosive as they were early on in the season and potentially compete with any team in the NFL. I think what's interesting about the NFC this year is there aren't a ton of teams. I mean, you look at the Packers, but beyond that, maybe the Rams. A bunch of teams are inconsistent, and it's not necessarily looking like any team is running away with it. And I think the Cowboys, among that other group of teams, as I mentioned, the Rams, the Packers, Cardinals are sliding off a little bit. Any team could win that conference. I think the fact that the Packers will most likely have home field advantage throughout will help them a lot. But I think if the Cowboys can fix some of those issues on offense, continue to be more balanced with their rushing attack, which they were against Washington, Pollard and Zeke complement each other pretty well when they're at their best, but they need to be at their best if this offense is going to click the way it did early on in the season. And I think they have a chance to do that. I am curious to see how it develops. I'm not necessarily predicting that it will bounce back to that level, but I think they have every bit of an opportunity to do.
Listen, all they need is for the Packers to lose one more time and they win. I'm pretty sure that they would have. Is it because of the conference record?
Conference tiebreaker record, right?
Okay, so I also want to shift to the NFC West. At the start of the year, everyone thought, including myself, this was going to be the best division in football. And in fairness, there's a strong argument to be made that it still is the case. But the reason why we expected that from that division was because we also assumed that the Seattle Seahawks would be a lot more prominent than they are right now. And there's obviously clearly there was a lot of patchwork that was done in the offseason to try and prevent leaks. Well, it's been leaking and it's fully kind of flooding right now. And to be fair, Russell Wilson hasn't played very well since his injury. He's actually played really poorly. But I also don't think that Pete Carroll has necessarily helped him out with his offensive game plan. And I think that this is going to be a big offseason for John Schneider. And listen, he's on the hot seat too, even though he has a contract extension till like 2026 or 2027. But I mean, what types of changes do you think need to occur this offseason? Is it more, Russell Wilson just needs a new environment at this point in his career, or maybe they keep him but they move on from Pete Carroll, or maybe it's some other kind of decision they need to do?
I think ultimately they will part ways with Pete Carroll, but I don't necessarily believe that that's the right thing to do. I, unfortunately, for the sake of Seattle, think that they're in complete rebuild mode. I think they need to move on from Russell Wilson, whether or not they move on from Pete Carroll. I don't think Russell Wilson wants to be there. And to your point, he hasn't played all that well the past 2 seasons, battling injury or not. He is aging, and I don't think he's anywhere near where he was at the beginning of his career. And you also have to remember a lot of those Seahawks teams depended on their defense, and they had a balanced rushing attack. They have almost no help in the run game this year. Their offensive line is not spectacular. They have all the weapons they could need at receiver, but their run game isn't really helping them. They're not really all that balanced, and I think they need to build up quite a bit. Defense, they need help rushing the passer. They need help in the secondary. Russell Wilson isn't playing as well as they would like him to, and the run game and offensive line is not playing all that well. So I think they need a ton of pieces, and I think they kind of need to get rid of Russell Wilson, get what they can for him, and move on. I think Pete Carroll is interesting. I think you could maybe convince some of the higher up Schneider to keep going with him and have him be in full rebuild mode. The only issue with that is he will have his hands all over that in the future. So if you do decide to move on from him, it'll still be his team. So I think you could potentially see a big shakeup in Seattle and see Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson leave town. I don't know what Pete Carroll would do, but I'm sure Russell Wilson would find a home somewhere. I think for Seattle, though, there's not much they can do right now that I think would beef them up for next year. Maybe get a good running back, maybe build up their offensive line and hope that their offense can return to some sort of explosiveness to offset some of their defensive deficiencies. But I don't think they have the pieces right now to compete anywhere near the top of that division. As you said, it's a well-rounded division at the top, and if Seattle was up there, it would be almost an unstoppable division. But I just don't think they're that close. I know they were competitive early on in the year, but with Russell's injury, him not coming back all that strong, I don't think they're anywhere near competing for a division title and the playoffs in the future. I think they need a complete reshape.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree. I just think that there's something being off. I actually went to the Rams-Seahawks game at SoFi with my dad, and to be honest, listen, it was cool to see Russell Wilson, just the figure, but as far as the kind of the dynamic, the playmaking, the improvisational skills that we're accustomed to seeing from him, it wasn't really there. Now, in fairness, the Rams defense is really good, but it's kind of been emblematic of the whole season, really, since his injury. Even before his injury, they really weren't doing that well, in all honesty. Okay, final 2 questions really quick, Ben, because I know I got to let you go in a minute. The AFC North is kind of like a Western film. It's just a wild, wild West out there. And just every time we buy into the Bengals, the next week they have a huge letdown. Now, I'm not saying that I don't buy into the Bengals, but I'm also saying I don't know if I buy into the Bengals necessarily. When you look at that division, because I feel like that division they're playing with about 4 different playoff spots right now. And I'm not saying all 4 of those teams are going to make it, but when you look at the standings, 4 of those teams are comprising, the 10 or 11 teams that are potentially capable of making the postseason. At this very moment in time, who do you think is the best team in that division? And ultimately, who do you think is going to win that division during the final 2 weeks of the regular season?
I'm split on who I think would win. If I had to pick, I would say probably the Ravens. I think Lamar Jackson coming back really helps that team. I mean, Hundley has been good in reserve, but I think Lamar is just that absolute game changer. There's no one else like him in the league, and I think he really adds that element that defenses can't really fully prepare for. And I think they're the best team because they're a little more consistent. I think the Bengals at their best are the best team in that division, but they're so inconsistent. It seems like they play up to their talent and then they play down to their talent. And you have to kind of find that middle ground if you're going to go into the playoffs and expect to go on the road in tough atmospheres and potentially compete for an AFC and potential Super Bowl. So I think the issue with the Bengals is their consistency, as you mentioned, whether their offense can be as explosive as it has been in some of their bigger games. But I think the Ravens have been there a little bit more. Harbaugh certainly understands what he needs to do at this point in the year. The Bengals are still a young team with a lot of young leaders. And I think the Ravens, ultimately, if they can get Lamar back and healthy, can compete for this division title. Now, the Ravens are a little inconsistent, too. In fact, that entire division is the definition of inconsistency. The Steelers, the Browns, it seems like none of those teams have stepped out with any level of consistency. And I think you'll probably only see the Ravens and Bengals make the playoffs. And I think the Ravens will win the division. The Bengals are a scary team to play in the wild card, but I absolutely think that they could win or lose depending on how they're feeling that day and ultimately burn out at some point in the playoffs. But I think the Ravens have the best chance to go the farthest, and I think they'll ultimately win the division.
I really respect Joe Burrow. The fact that he tore his ACL, less than a year ago, and he's back and he's playing at an elite level. I just love his moxie. I just love his confidence. So I wouldn't be upset with the Bengals. It's just every week it's a crapshoot. You just don't know how they're going to come out. Okay, final question for you, and I have to throw this in because obviously one of these guys is our kind of Wisconsin guy as well. For the MVP race. So, listen, Rodgers, should be the leading favorite at this moment in time. I have Brady narrowly right behind him, or maybe not narrowly right behind him, but just behind him. But the problem is both of those two guys, Ben, they've got 2 things going against them. One is they've obviously won before, which I don't think is always a great thing. But also from a narrative perspective, they both took 2 big narrative hits at some point in this year. Obviously, Rodgers with the immunized and Brady with the temper tantrum with Dennis Allen and the tablet. Just not a great look for him, even though I think Rodgers' look was a lot worse. So unbiasedly, Jonathan Taylor's our guy, but I also think that a real case can be made for him to be in the MVP conversation, if not atop the conversation at this point, because the Colts are 9-6. They look like perhaps the most feared wild card team in the NFL playoffs right now in the playoff picture. And all 9 wins are a direct reflection of his productivity because he rushes for over 100 yards in all 9 games, and they win those 9 games. Do you give him any shot whatsoever in these final 2 weeks of winning the MVP and maybe stealing it away from Rodgers or Brady?
Well, I think you made a good point. I think Rodgers absolutely has to be at the top right now. I think you look at how important Jonathan Taylor is to the Colts. You look at what happened when Rodgers was out. The Packers' offense was abysmal, and him coming back, and suddenly they're one of the best teams in the NFL. So I think the importance conversation absolutely has to include Rodgers in it. And with his stats and it being a quarterback award, I think he is absolutely at the top. I think if you look at Jonathan Taylor, he has a chance, but he has to be really big in these last few weeks. I know a lot of people have talked about how, Derrick Henry ran for 2,000 yards and he didn't even get an MVP vote. Well, that was a different year, but regardless, that 2,000-yard mark is going to be really important for JT. If he wants to be squarely in that conversation, have a chance to win, he's actually going to need to pass that mark, which I think he'll needs somewhere like 200 yards a game or maybe slightly less than that to cross that mark. And he'll have to have several more MVP moments. I know he did against the Patriots. That was the big 70 some odd run that ultimately clinched that game for them. And he's run for over 100, I think, in 7, 8, 9 consecutive games. I know he had touchdowns in all of those games except for this last one. He has a chance, and I think he'll ultimately get an MVP vote, but he needs to have huge performances, which is certainly possible. They don't have a strong schedule closing out the year here. He could do it, and they're fighting for a playoff spot, so they're not going to cut his carries at all. But I think he absolutely has a chance to do it, but ultimately I think it's just too much of a mountain to climb. It's too high of a mountain to climb, and he might struggle to get past that point, and I think it'll be Rodgers.
I agree. I think it'll be Rodgers, but man, would it be incredible for JT to win. I just love that now the NFL. I mean, I've been saying since he first came into the league, I was like, listen, you guys don't understand. We've seen this guy in college. He is going to translate into the NFL. Has the work ethic. In fact, I've actually reached out. Unfortunately, the Colts communications department, I've tried bringing him on here multiple times. They've rejected it multiple times. I'm going to get him on here at some point. But it would be a great storyline to see Jonathan Taylor win. I surely hope to see it. Ben, as always, thank you so much for joining me, and happy holidays to you and your family. And we'll catch up again soon.
Same to you and yours. Thanks, Jonah.
All right. Always fun to have Ben Cross with me. It's been a while since I've had him. Okay. Final topic before my Malkins moments. I wanted to touch on this before I brought Ben, but I ran out of time. So when it comes to back to the NBA with Russell Westbrook, I know a lot of people have touched on him commenting on the critical play over the last couple of weeks and really over the whole season. And, he came out, he was asked a pretty innocuous question a couple of days ago, and he was asked about his play. And he basically just came out and said that he thinks he's playing fine, and people are expecting him to be going out and putting up these huge triple doubles. And all he can do is kind of control how he plays and the effort that he gives out night in and night out, which is what he's doing. So in fairness to Westbrook, I didn't just want to listen to the clippings. I didn't want to listen to the snippets. I went back and I listened to the entire interview because I wanted to hear the unvarnished truth, the uncensored interview from start to finish. And let me first just say that you're not going to find, and I know Russell Westbrook isn't watching me right now, but if for whatever reason he is, you're not going to find a bigger proponent and a bigger advocate of Russell Westbrook. I absolutely admire this guy. He's one of my favorite players in the NBA. He's one of the big reasons why I loved the NBA and why I love the game of basketball. His commitment to his craft, his relentless energy. He never cheats us. He never cheats us as the fans. And I respect the hell out of him. He's from LA. He played at UCLA. I have his jersey, for crying out loud, behind me. I am in awe of Russell Westbrook. He's a surefire Hall of Famer. He's one of the greatest NBA players of all time. And the effort that he's put out is incredible. And I can't thank him enough for all the memories that he continues to leave for me. And again, I've always been a defender of him, whether it was the shortcomings in OKC or with Houston or with Washington. I've been a public defender of Westbrook. I absolutely think he is incredible. But he missed the boat on this one. And it pains me to say it, but he simply missed the mark here because it's a bit delusional right now, what he's saying. And I know that he was kind of brushing off the question, kind of half jokingly, self-assessing. But if he truly thinks that what people are expecting from him is to put out triple doubles, and especially exorbitant triple doubles like this, then he's unfortunately failed to realize what the true issue is. And he's failed to realize what it is that people are expecting from him, because what he's showing is a lack of understanding and a lack of awareness right now. And again, I hate to have to say this about him because he's one of my favorite players ever. Again, I have his jersey right behind me, but I'm not. The problem is he's not holding himself accountable enough. Now, I'm not encouraging him to disclose everything that's on his mind or to kind of unload everything onto the media and for the media to be his kind of therapist. He doesn't need to do that. I'm not saying he has to disclose every single thing he's doing wrong, how he's addressing it, how he's trying to work on it. But I do think that there needs to be a higher level of accountability in his direction, because for him to be kind of ignorant and naive about his level of play, I mean, then he's just lying to himself. He's lying to us. It's deceitful. And again, it's a little bit delusional as well, because what we're asking from him is not just to go out and put out triple doubles. Our expectations of Westbrook is to be a sound basketball player, to contribute to winning basketball, to be making sound decisions, to be taking care of the basketball, not turning it over, being more efficient, being more reliable. To his credit, he's always available. He's played in every single game. And from that perspective, he's been a little bit reliable. But when it comes to productivity on the court and efficiency, he just hasn't been there. And the reality is, in full disclosure, listen, the guy's making $44 million this year, $47 million next year. Now, I'm not disparaging him for signing that contract. Good for him for getting that contract. But with that contract comes some expectations. I think it's fair for people to hold him to a high standard if he's making that kind of money. So when he gives you 13 points, 12 rebounds, 11 assists against the Nets on Christmas, but he goes 4 for 20, it's simply not good enough. It's not good enough. Even against the Houston Rockets last night, he had a 24-point triple-double, but he committed 7 turnovers. He just has to take care of the basketball. And again, the NBA is a make-or-miss league, so it's not like I'm expecting him to shoot a high field goal percentage every single night. Those aren't the only criteria with which we're grading him, that it's based on. But the problem is there haven't been enough stretches of consistency that he's shown where he is exhibiting those sound basketball decisions. It's been fluctuating. Every other game, he's got one great performance one game and a subpar, if not poor performance the next game. And so the problem is he hasn't been showing signs that he's been trying to improve that aspect of his game. And that's the issue right now, is he's just not holding himself accountable enough. Again, I don't care if he wants to be short with the media, if he wants to be evasive, if he doesn't want to disclose everything. He's well within his right to do that. But at this point, these acts of defiance, it's right now, I just don't think he's holding himself accountable enough at this point. And for someone who is making that kind of money, I think those expectations should be had. I truly do. And again, I was a fan of the trade, even though I had my reservations. I like the aspect of availability for him. I do think there is a huge benefit to having someone who is just available. I mean, availability is the best ability. That's how the saying goes. And it's true, he's been there, but he hasn't been as efficient and as productive that we would hope, especially during winning times. And that's what the expectation is, for him to be contributing to a winning team. And I just think that whenever, he's trying to fit in, he's trying to complement LeBron and AD, but his attitude has to change. And I think behind closed doors, that's something that's really concerning for LeBron, to hear those types of comments. So again, I love Westbrook. I've been one of his biggest defenders. I would still defend him. I can't defend these comments. It's hard for me to do that. It's hard for me to do that. Okay. Final topic, my Malkins moments, running a couple minutes over. I have some great Malkins moments for you. Have to start with Shohei Ohtani, the LA Angels' baseball star. He won the AP Player of the Year award to culminate what's been just the most incredible individual season for accomplishments for this guy. He was the 2021 AP Male Athlete of the Year, 27 years old, from Japan, was the unanimous AL MVP, batted over 257, 46 home runs, 100 RBIs, 103 runs scored, 26 stolen bases, also was a starting pitcher, had a 9-2 overall record, 3.18 ERA, 156 strikeouts in 130 innings pitched. He made the All-Star team. He competed in the Home Run Derby. He won the Silver Slugger Award for the first time ever. In fact, he broke a 3-year streak of NBA players winning the AP Male Athlete of the Year award. Either an MLB or an NBA player has won the award the past 9 seasons. And Ohtani is the first Japanese athlete to win the award and just the second non-American athlete to win it since 1988. He actually joined countrywoman Naomi Osaka, the tennis star. She won the Female AP Athlete of the Year award in 2020. He also won the Commissioner's Achievement Award. It was just the 16th time all time that there's been a recipient of the Commissioner's Historic Achievement Award. Last time was the Yankees' Derek Jeter and Dodgers legendary broadcaster Vin Scully in 2014 to win it. So big shout out to Shohei Ohtani on an incredible season. Josh Allen with the Bills when they won 33-21 on Sunday. In that win over the Patriots, he became the first player in NFL history with 100 passing touchdowns and 20 rushing touchdowns through his first 4 years in the NFL. He had 314 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, also led the team in rushing versus the Patriots. And again, he's having another great season, and the Bills are ascending, and he's a big reason why. Dak Prescott shined in the Cowboys' 56-14 thrashing of the Washington football team. So here's the interesting thing. He became the second player in NFL history to throw a touchdown pass to a wide receiver, a tight end, a running back, and an offensive lineman in a game this year. In a game period in the NFL. He had 330 yards passing, 4 touchdowns for Dak. Big-time performance. The only other time that's ever happened, Kurt Warner in the 1999 divisional playoff game against the Minnesota Vikings when he was with the St. Louis Rams. He threw for like 340 yards, 5 touchdowns, and interception to beat the Vikings 49-37. In fact, St. Louis Rams ended up winning the Super Bowl that year. They ended up beating the Titans in the Super Bowl. They defeated the Buccaneers in the NFC Championship game. Okay, final couple. Steph Curry reached 3,000 career three-pointers made. He's the first player in NBA history to do that. Obviously, we saw him just break the all-time three-pointers made record a couple weeks ago, breaking Ray Allen's record. And 2 just heartwarming stories. So Houston Rockets Christian Wood in a game against the against the New Orleans Hornets. Not the New Orleans Hornets. Wow, the Charlotte Hornets. Jeez. Christian Wood ended up throwing a really bad errant pass that hit a female spectator just squarely in the side of the head, and he offered her free courtside tickets to any game of her choosing, again, a Houston Rockets game. So that's a nice gesture from him. And then Cordero Patterson over the weekend, he ran into a mom with 2 kids, two young children, and one of the daughters was crying, and he asked the mom, why is the daughter crying? And she said because her brother had received a football and she hadn't. And Cordero Patterson went out of his way to approach a Falcons staff member to retrieve another ball and hand it to her to stop her from crying and to give her a moment that she could remember forever. So that was just a really special moment, and we always want to recognize those moments on Malkin's Moments. So that's all the time that I got for today. I know I'm going over a couple minutes. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific, Mondays and Wednesday mornings. Follow me and subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin on YouTube. Follow me, Jonah Malkin, on Twitter, or at morning_Joe_ on Twitter, jmalk97 on Instagram, and Jonah Malkin on TikTok. As always, have a lovely rest of your morning and a happy new year to you and your families. I'll see you guys all in 2022.